Thank you, Bill, for the great introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending this webinar. My name is Kyusing Wu. Right now, I'm a tenure-track assistant professor here at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I just relocated to UT last month. Prior to joining UT, I was a tenure-track assistant professor at State University of New York. So today here is our first day of class here at UT, and I'm very excited here to share the research that I'm doing recently. So for this PowerPoint slides of this presentation, you can go to the link in the lower right corner. It's gishub.org/WMC. You can also scan the QR code using your cell phone to access the Google Slides. And so throughout my presentation, you might see a number of QR codes. And you're welcome to scan and check out those additional resources. Okay, so the topic I'm presenting today is mapping wetland inundation dynamics, specifically using Google Earth Engine and high-resolution LiDAR data and aerial imagery. Okay, so the topic I'm presenting today is primarily based on an article that we recently published in Remote Sensing of Environment. And you can check out the link in the lower left corner here, or you can scan the QR code to download the article if you're interested in reading the article. And first of all, I would like to thank my co-authors for their contributions to this article. And especially I want to thank Charles Lane from the US EPA and Megan Lane from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for their strong support in this project. Okay, so here's the outline of my talk. So first, I will briefly introduce my study area, the prairie pothole region and the wetland in this region. And then I will talk about some of the existing wetland inventory or related wetland products for the area. And then I will briefly introduce some of the work that I have done in the past few years for wetland mapping using LiDAR data and aerial imagery. And then we'll go to the Google Earth Engine and the primary topic that I will be talking about today using Google Earth Engine. And at the end, you will, if we have time, we want to give you some quick demo about the Google Earth Engine apps that I have developed for mapping inundation dynamics. Okay, and so first let's talk about the wetlands in the prairie pothole region. For those who are not familiar, it's a vast area covering about over 715,000 square kilometers, and it covers 3 provinces in Canada and 5 states in the U.S., including North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, and Iowa. And so the PPR is characterized by millions of these wetland depressions formed during the last glaciation. And if you see from the aerial imagery in here, you can clearly see what it looks like on the landscape in the PPR. And I would like to point out that those wetlands, also known as potholes, the median size is, according to the National Wetlands Inventory, the median size is only about 1,600 square meters. So it's roughly smaller than 2 Landsat pixels. And also it's very shallow. Usually there's like 1 meter. So you can see that they are very small in size and also shallow in depth. And if we follow zoom in to see the photos, here is what it looks like. And so the wetlands inundation is very dynamic in this region, and the water supplies comes from a variety of resources, including rainfall, snow melt, and also inflow from the upland area, and also some groundwater discharge. So they're very important. They provide a critical habitat for a lot of wildlife species. Here are some of the photos, especially migratory waterfalls here in the US. Okay, so next I'm going to show you some of the area images that can demonstrate the dynamics of the inundation. So if you see here from 2009 and to 2017, so these 6 images are from the USDA net images, 1 meter resolution, and usually acquired during the summer, during the agricultural growing season. So if you see from, for example, from the 2 images on the left side, A and D, so those are yellow arrows point to the location. For example, in 2009, it was a relatively dry year. And if you see through in 2014, you can see those locations, most of those previously separated wetlands, they merged together to form a larger wetland complex because basically the water become merged together to become a larger one. So it's very dynamic, and we sometimes have dry year, but we also have wet year. So my research is focusing how do we know, for example, some of the research questions we're trying to address is what's the existing water capacity in these wetlands? And for example, what's the potential water capacity? How much water we need in order to some of the wetlands to merge into a larger wetland complex? And when do they merge? How long does it take for them to flow out to the downstream wetlands? Right, some of these questions. And so, in order to map the inundation, first let's talk about some of the existing data that we have for the area, for the PPR. So as you can see, the first one is the National Wetlands Inventory, or the MWI. So you can go to the website here. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the NWI. So, and it's the most spatially and categorically detailed wetland inventory here available for the contiguous US. So basically, it's a polygon data set, and it has attributes indicate the wetland type and also the water regime. For example, here from ranging from temporary to semi-permanent, permanently flooded wetlands. And as you can see from the right in here, some of the polygon overlaid on top of the NWI, the net 1 meter resolution imaging. And you can see that right now the wetland inundation area is much larger than the NWI polygon. So the NWI is the most comprehensive, but it does have some limitations. So for the PPR region, most of the NWI were developed by manual interpretation and digitization of black and white area imagery acquired in the 1980s. So it no longer reflect the current inundation status. So we need to basically update the inventory. And so the next one, a related product, is the Global Surface Water Explorer. And so here's the website. If you're interested, you can go take a look, check it out. And so this one was actually developed using the Google Earth Engine platform. But here I'm going to show you like what it looks like here, the same location, and you can overlay the global surface water products on the area image. You can clearly see that it captures large water bodies, but they largely fail to capture those smaller ones. So, for example, sub-hectare wetlands features. And so the product was primarily developed using the Google Earth Engine, the Landsat Data Archive, dating back to 1984 to 2018. And it provides monthly, so basically it has the temporal frequency of monthly inundation extent over the past 3 decades. But it's good for mapping large water bodies, but it has limitation to capture those smaller ones. So if you recall earlier, I mentioned, so in the PPR, according to the NWI, the median size is only roughly 2 Landsat pixels. So they were not able to capture those smaller ones. And you will also see that for those inundation pixels around the edges of those wetlands, they're basically closely match the current wetland status. So next, I'm going to briefly introduce some of the work that I have done in the past few years for wetland mapping using LiDAR data and aerial imagery. So the first one was published in 2016 with Chuck Lane from the US EPA. So for this article, we use LiDAR data to estimate the existing water storage capacity, but we also can calculate the potential water storage capacity for each individual wetlands using the so-called contour tree methods. And on the right, you can see some of the results. So the yellow one polygons is from the NWI. So the blue one is delineated using LiDAR. And you can clearly see that using LiDAR, we can delineate the current wetland inundated status. But we can also potentially identify some of the wetlands that are already dried out, but basically no visible water can be detected during the NAP acquisition of the NAP imagery. But it doesn't mean that they are already gone, but it's just indication that it was dry during that time. So basically this one gives you a quick some information about the current inundation status, but we only tested using one HUD 8 watershed. Okay. So the next one is about modeling the hydrologic connectivity. So once we know like what's the potential water storage capacity, and then once those wetland individual one, they're very dynamic. So they have the so-called fill and spill hydrological processes because of inundation, because of rainfall and also snow melt. So some of the similarly we see from the NAP imagery on the lower left corner, you can see like they merge together to form a larger wetland complex, and it's very dynamic because the water, each individual wetland, they also have their individual catchment. So how do we characterize the nested hierarchical structure and also figure out when they fully fill, where does the water going to flow to which wetland? So basically this article gives some algorithm to delineate the origin and destination, like figure out the wetland connectivity between those adjacent wetlands. And so here's some of the results. So you can see from here, we use LiDAR data. We also use aerial imagery. So if you see from around the center here, you see a thick blue line. That one was the NSD flow line. So those are more like permanent water features. And by using LiDAR and these are high resolution imagery, we can actually delineate those temporary water connections. So if you see those black arrows indicating the temporary water connection. So you also have the indication where once those wetlands are filled up, where do the water flow to? So you have the upstream, you have the downstream, you have the whole connectivity. And if you see from the right in here, you can see some of those black arrows actually align very well with the pink color. So basically the pink color represent some of the moisture where those wetlands and vegetation grow. So basically you can use LiDAR data to map some of those temporary connectivity that will not map in the NSD data set. Okay, and so the next one more recently is a new algorithm we developed to delineate the nested hierarchy. So as you see from some of the time series NAP imagery, right? They are very dynamic. So if you see from the left to the right, you will see that the shape changes. Basically, one wetland split into two individual ones. But if you see from the right, it basically two individual ones can merge together into a bigger wetland complex. So the algorithm, this one can delineate the hierarchy and also a number of attributes that we can use to provide more realistic information about each individual depressions and wetlands, so that we can have those information to input into some other hydrological modeling. And again, you can scan the QR code. All the source code and the software are published on GitHub. So you're more than welcome to check out those resources. Here shows you more information about the results. Right? We use a LiDAR bathymetry data, bathymetry LiDAR data to actually delineate the hierarchy. So if you see from the lower right corner here, this is the current inundation status. So you see that some of those wetlands will actually merge together already. For example, P2, P4 already merged into a bigger one. But actually, if you went back to check the imagery in the 1957, you can clearly see that they're actually separated during those dry periods. So our algorithm can detect the hierarchy before they merge into the bigger one. And it's very efficient, so we can check out if you're interested in. And based on some of the existing data products and some of the work I have done, so I've always wanted to basically to scale up to apply to a large area. And so the NWI provide the most comprehensive, but it's not up to date. And especially for the PPR, most of the data set were based on the 1980s imagery. And so the global surface water product is also good for mapping large water bodies, but they are very difficult to map those small water bodies and sub-hectare wetlands. So how can we better integrate the LiDAR data and NAP imagery to map these small water bodies is our goal here. So, and the platform we're using is Google Earth Engine. And for those who are not familiar, it's different. Google Earth Engine is different from Google Earth. So Google Earth, I'm sure some of you must have used it before. So basically, it has a lot of satellite imagery that you can view, you can visualize, but there's no analysis capability. So the Google Earth Engine basically is a cloud computing environment from Google. It's free. You can sign up using a Gmail account, and so some of the the things that Google Earth Engine can do is to create some base map. For example, from remote sensing, we have a cloud, like it's a big problem. And this is something before and after Google Earth Engine. So basically, they have the data archive. They can quickly run through some algorithm to quickly create loads of base maps. And some of those are actually being used in Google Earth. Okay, and this is the interface of the Google Earth Engine code editor. You can go to the link in the upper right corner to check it out. We don't have time to go into the detail about how to use this one, but there are a lot of tutorials online that you can learn and how to use it. So, and next I'm going to introduce how we use this one to map wetland inundation here in the PPR region. So we tested the algorithm in 8 subbasins, so basically 26 water sets. And the LiDAR data we used, basically the LiDAR DM, it's over 100 gigabyte. And we also have 6 time periods of a NAP imagery. And so these are LiDAR and the NAP imagery are the primary data set we use to map the inundation. And then we compare the data set to the the NWI and also the JRC global surface water products. And we see from the histogram on the upper lower right corner here, you can see it's very dynamic. So basically, the global surface water product is a monthly product. And if you aggregate them together, so and you see like some of the pixels are only detected 10% of the time during those 35 years. And some will detect it, for example, 50% of the time. So you can see very dynamic from temporarily flooded to seasonally flooded to semi-permanently flooded or to permanent flooded. And so here shows you more examples of what it looks like on the landscape. And this is the kind of a general framework of how we use this one. So, and I want to point out that Google Earth Engine is free, but you cannot do everything you want to do. They have a memory limitation. So, and for us, we found that using the Hacktang waterset is something that's reasonable and can be handled using Google Earth Engine. If you use a much larger area, you will most likely run into some memory issues. And so we have developed some like app that you can actually go online and click, select one waterset, and then it will automatically retrieve all the NAP images available for that specific area, and then mosaic them into one imagery for multiple years. And we also include some other indices, for example, NDVI and NDWI. So the NAP imagery is primarily used for unsupervised classification. And once we do the classification, then we need to assign labels to figure out like which cluster is water. And so for this one, we use the JRC surface water accounts to figure out like to help identify the water clusters. And these are the potential water bodies. And then we can use LiDAR, surface depression from LiDAR to actually refine the water bodies. And then so we get some potential wetland inundation maps. And then eventually we can compare to NWI and the JRC product. So here shows you some images about what it looks like, the JRC product. So on the left side is the water occurrence, showing you, for example, in the past 35 years, some of those pixels, the color ranging from red to blue. So you can see the gradient. So the blue represent they are detected more during those 35 years as water pixels. Red one represent lower frequency. So, and on the right here, you will see the blue one, that is the one we use to, is the permanent water mask to use to identify the water clusters from the unsupervised classification. So once we identify the potential clusters, then we can use LiDAR to refine. So basically LiDAR, we can use LiDAR to delineate the surface depression, basically the maximum inundation extent you can go based on the topography, because based on the unsupervised classification, there might be some commission errors, especially those shadows from trees and also shadows from buildings and also terrain. So the LiDAR actually can effectively remove some of those commission errors. And in our study, it showed that roughly it can reduce 10% of the potential inundation area. Those are basically just the shadows from the map imaging. And here shows you the results. So this is the highlights of using Google Earth Engine. Right on the left side shows you the inundation in 2015 using the map images. But we have multiple years, right? So for the study area, we have 6 time periods. And you can clearly see that right now using this algorithm, we can quickly give to delineate on updated inundation status for the region. And on the right side here shows you the water accounts for those 6 time periods, those 6 map imaging. And the blue one represent that the water was detected in all those 6 imagery, and for the some of those only detected 1 time or 2 times. So we can clearly see that we have a better wetland inundation maps compared to, for example, here is the JRC water extent and also the NWI. So I'm going to show you like here what's the differences. So on the left side here, you can see the JRC product 30 meter based on Landsat. They were actually not able to capture those smaller wetlands. You will see the red arrows here pointing out, right? So these were not captured by the surface water product. And also the boundary, you can see they do not match very well with the net imaging. And the right shows you, I already saw this one earlier, the NWI. So basically, right now we can use Google Earth Engine to quickly delineate the current inundation status, but also we have the temporal frequency. It depends on the available net imagery in each water set. And again, this one shows you more examples. So the yellow one represents the NWI, and the blue polygon represents the JRC product. So you can clearly see that, okay, the NWI, some of those polygons, there are no visible water body. And the JRC product, you can see that the boundary, it just cannot capture those smaller wetlands. And here it shows you more using the Google Earth Engine platform. So we can delineate the white outline represent the water, maximum water extent delineated using the net imagery for the past few years, 6 time periods. So we can provide basically updated status about the inundation area and provide some input that potentially can be used to update the national wetlands inventory. And so I don't have time to go into the details about the algorithm, but here is the interface. So you can go to the link, click the demo to go to the website, or you can, if you want to see the source code, you can click the other link. You can also scan the QR code. So if you get to the website, you will see that a lot of data layers. So this one shows you how to, from the acquire the net imagery and do classification, and at the end, basically step by step, how the data will actually, the data product will derive. And there are also some histograms, and you can check this out. So all the source code are already online. And additionally, I also have some other apps that some of you might be interested in. For example, the net imagery viewer. So basically, you can select any watershed, and then you automatically filter out and mosaic all those available net imagery for your watershed for the multiple years. And you also can also compare before and after, for basically compare the changes of the landscape. If you are interested in, you can go to the link in the upper right corner, and I think that's all I have, and I already went over time, so I'll be happy to take answer any questions after Melanie's presentation. Okay, thank you all for your attention.
All right, thanks, Krishan. That was great. We have a lot of questions to get to when we get there. So people seem to really find this interesting. So, but we'll get to that after Melanie's presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and change control.